The Crusade of Varna. This was an event that probably defined the next few hundred years of Eastern Europe. It was an attempt by a coalition of Christian powers to kick the Ottoman Sultanate out of Europe, because for a while now the Ottomans had been eating chunks out of the rotting Byzantine Empire, and that was basically the modern name for the remnants of the Eastern Roman Empire. They'd established a foothold, the Ottomans, on the European side of the Dardanelles, and the Christian kingdoms in Europe found this quite alarming. Before any coordinated crusades, we have to look back at the initial provocations for the war. So in 1440, Ottoman forces lay siege to the Hungarian border fort of Belgrade. And this was part of a wider ploy where the Ottomans were trying to conquer the Kingdom of Serbia. And it had initially been created as a kind of buffer state between Hungary and the Ottomans. But eventually the Ottomans returned empty-handed to Anatolia. They weren't able to take the fort, but they had to go back to Anatolia to deal with an invasion from Karaman. But this did leave Hungary and the Ottomans technically at war. Hungary did have its own problems though, and so couldn't capitalise on the situation. It was in the midst of its own civil war. The king, Sigismund, had died in 1437, and then his son, Albert, died 2 years later. After Albert died, his son Ladislaus was born, and this is why his son Ladislaus has the epithet the Posthumous. The kingdom would not fall to Ladislaus, however, and King Vladislav of Poland secured the crown with the help of the noble John Hunyadi. And in 1442, Vladislav rejected the offer of peace from the Ottomans, since part of the deal was that he had to give up the fortress of Belgrade. But since the Hungarian succession had been solved, they could start to think about offensive action against the Ottomans. Hunyadi, having helped Vladislav secure the throne of Hungary, was given the task of securing the southern border. So he defeated 3 raiding Ottoman forces in the years 1441 and 42. And then in 1443, the Pope, who'd been in contact with the Eastern European kingdoms, then published a crusading bull against the Ottomans. And at the Diet of Buda that same year in Hungary, war was declared against the Ottomans. It was quite the belief among the crusading forces that the Ottomans should be quite easy to expel from Europe, because they weren't really prepared for the invasion, and they'd recently needed to retreat to Anatolia to fight off the Karamanid Beylik. So the Crusaders advanced into the Ottomans. And the Battle of Niš was the first encounter between some forces. The Ottoman governor of the European provinces of the Sultanate was forced to flee to Sofia, the town of Sofia, and warn the Sultan Murad of the invasion. But during the retreat of the Ottoman governor, he burned down towns that they passed in an attempt to bog down the Crusaders using scorched earth tactics. And then, on the advice of his commanders, the Sultan then burnt down the town of Sofia and retreated to some nearby mountain passes where he could fortify his smaller force. And the Crusaders followed, and the Battle of Zlatista ensued. The Crusaders attempted to push through the mountain pass to defeat the Ottoman forces. And this battle was fought in the snow. It was freezing. It was a properly grim experience. The Crusaders were not able to defeat the Ottomans and had to retreat back home, because it was winter now, really. You don't want to have to supply an army during winter. A pursuing force was sent after the Crusaders, but this pursuing force was actually defeated at the Battle of Cunovica. And this was a misplay from the Ottomans, because important hostages were captured, including the Sultan's own son-in-law. Sultan Murad now decided to open peace negotiations. But in the end, King Vladislav was convinced by a papal legate that the Crusaders should follow him in another campaign against the Ottomans in the year 1444. A peace had actually been ratified at Szeged, but this was just reneged upon by the king, because he saw an opportunity to kick the Ottomans out of Europe. So Vladislav leads another force into the Ottoman Sultanate. But the Crusaders were tactically outmaneuvered. They were caught near the fort of Varna by the much larger Ottoman force of 60,000 men. The Crusaders only number about 20,000. The Crusaders had wanted to retreat, but the terrain blocked them from doing this because their enemy, Lake Varna, the Black Sea, and steep wooded slopes stood between them and escape, so they were forced into battle with horrific odds. There were 3 Ottomans for every crusader. The resultant battle was a disaster for the Christians, who lost about 15,000 of their number, and their king, Vladislav, died. The Ottoman victory here ensured that they could then go on to conquer Constantinople in 1453, without too much threat of other European powers aiding the Byzantines, and it also threw Hungary back into civil war, until John Hunyadi was elected as a regent for Ladislaus the Posthumous until he came of age. So if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, it really does help the channel, and do subscribe to keep up to date with content.